The crisis continues and it becomes more and more evident each day that passes by. So today we will discuss 8 charts that show the global economy falling apart. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Let's get into this article out of Bloomberg. The former SEC director rips the red tape off his mouth. Listen to what he said right here, the highlighted portion near the bottom. The current market ecosystem is not sustainable and significant changes are coming one way or another. Now, these changes that he's referring to, surely they will not be beneficial to you and I. That's what worries me very much. Now, what exactly is this ecosystem not being sustainable that he's talking about? So let's get into a few of these charts right now. Look at this. The quote-unquote great jobs data sends the market sinking downward in a big downward spiral there. But of course, as long as the central banks print up some more money, it will rise up once again. But it is surely quite interesting to see how fast the market can move down. So we're going to move on right here to look at the Euro USD, trying to show you that it has moved back down to the levels from 2003. The euro just continuously is sliding downward, and it just is unable to pick up any pace, and it looks to be heading towards parity. This is quite different than what has happened previous in these past few years, I would say prior to the financial crisis. So let's move on here to discuss more right from the St. Louis Fed's website. We're talking about federal government, consumer credit, student loans. Right here, one of the biggest bubbles that they have to worry about right now is the student loan bubbles. And look how bad it became right around the financial crisis. Nobody is able to afford what they were before, so of course they have to take on more debt. Now, I don't necessarily suggest that people take on more debt, but people are finding themselves in that situation, and this is obviously really spiking up here, and you can see the exponential rise. It looks like a roller coaster going up, and this is obviously, you know exactly where this is headed. Take a look at this. Consumer Price Index from 1775 to 2012. Now we have some inflation, we have some deflation in these years from the creation of the U.S. up until today. But if you see, in particular from 1971, it is a straight line upwards practically. There was some inflationary periods, and definitely you have the inflation post World War I that really never got back to the levels prior to that. But as soon as 1971 hit, it just skyrocketed upward. And of course, as soon as you allow any sort of government agency to take on additional debt, guess what they're going to do? That's pretty obvious. So we'll move on right here. That was out of the Business Insider, but this here is just showing you the debt to GDP ratio percentage. And you know, there are many different numbers that I've seen for these countries here. It all depends on what you're including. Are you going to include the unfunded liabilities? And I'll talk about that in a moment. But essentially, these are fairly accurate numbers. Where we look at Japan in first place, they have the title here at 400% debt to GDP ratio. Ireland around the same, Singapore, Portugal, Belgium. And you move down to the United States at 233%, and so on. Now, these numbers, like I said, they all vary, but it doesn't matter. Even at 100% debt to GDP ratio, it can't really be sustained. And here they are going several times over that. We all know what has happened to this economy. It died many years ago, and they are simply pumping blood through a dead carcass. It isn't anything but a show. let's move on to what I wrote about in my book. The hidden truth is that the numbers that they're showing us for this debt to GDP ratio do not include the largest parts of the debt. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid are considered, quote unquote, unfunded liabilities or off balance sheet. So what exactly do you think that they're going to do as long as they can put much of their debt off balance sheet? Well, of course, they're going to continue to expand on that debt. As long as it can be put off the balance sheet, we'll worry about it in the next election cycle. We promise, we promise, we promise. This tax is temporary. We promise. How many times do we want to be swindled? They don't come up in the official statistics, but the truth is that there are still forms of debt held by the government. And they're also discussed here the aging populations around the world. And that's Japan, obviously in the first place there in the chart I just showed you, and how that relates to the aging population is unbelievable to think of where they are headed. Look at this, total non-revolving credit. This is essentially the expansion of the monetary supply. Once again, 1971 is where it really took off, but you can go further back and say that as soon as the Federal Reserve was put into place, they essentially never stopped inflating. And that is going on till today, and it's going to get even worse. There's pretty obvious to look at this. This happens to be total non-revolving credit, but in essentially each and every indicator we look at, things are expanding, things are getting worse. So what about this? This is the number of homeless in New York City shelters increasing over the past few decades. There are more and more people that are finding themselves in poverty. This is out of Bloomberg, but you can see these statistics anywhere, and just look outside of your window. You know that in most cities the amount of homeless is expanding, and these are statistics that are real. They go beyond the S&P 500, they go beyond the Dow Jones. So obviously we have a real problem to deal with. Look at this carnage. A range of currencies have slumped since the end of June, with the most recent declines leading to numerous multi-year lows. We're looking at Brazil, Sweden, the euro, Japan, and so on. They are declining significantly against the dollar. Now, what is it about the dollar that's so wonderful? Well, the fact is that they have the Federal Reserve behind them. Other than that, there isn't much to show for at this moment compared to these other countries. And that's essentially what the markets are banking on, that the Federal Reserve is willing to print more than the rest of the guys. So, of course, money is flowing that direction. These other countries are, in fact, in many ways, not worse off than the U.S. with their debt and other factors, but the Federal Reserve is simply willing to backstop them at all costs. Let's move on to this last article. Greek government presses Social Security funds to hand over the cash. This is out of the Financial Times. Obviously, we know what's happening in Greece right now. They are being pressured every single day to hand over more money because of their situation that they're in, with their debt expanding, particularly since the Troika made their way into the country. Greece's cash-strapped Syriza government is pressing the country's social security funds to hand over hundreds of millions of euros immediately. This is the highlighted portion to ensure that the pensions and civil servant salaries are paid this month. Now, what would happen if they didn't pay up? Think about that in any country, wherever you live. If it's the United States or Canada, the UK, Australia, wherever it is that you live, they stop paying out a bunch of people, or they give them less money. And of course, these individuals are probably already cash strapped. So what do you think is going to happen? And it's pretty obvious. You're going to have civil unrest, you're going to have riots, you're going to have all sorts of these type of violent events that we've seen taking place in Greece, for example. So this is something that we need to really pay attention to. When a country is in debt, when they get into a serious scenario like this, there could be riots, there could be civil unrest, and the chaos that we've seen so many times before. And that is very concerning to me. I hope it is to you as well. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. I'm continuing on with this information, trying to bring out all of these type of videos covering the news, as well as building on the financial education that the government simply won't get into, that the education system simply will not get into. So I'm there to fill the void. So I hope you enjoy all of this. I'm getting to all of your emails. It's very, very difficult. There's so many, but I assure you I do respond to my emails. The best place definitely is at the insiders. So if you get on there, I definitely reply to those people first. I only reply to my other emails as soon as the insiders email is completely empty. So that's just for your information there. I'm always asked about this in my emails because I don't bring it up enough, but I do consultations over Skype. So if you're interested in that, please let me know. That's something that I do, and I don't really mention it that often, just because there's so much information to cover. But if you're interested in that, let me know. And I'm going to move on just to the last thing, and that is, if you want the latest and greatest intel, you need to be an insider. And you can do so by getting to the moneygpsinsiders.com. The moneygps.com. Scroll down to the bottom, fill in your email address, and you get occasional emails from me with good, short, concise info.